In episode 7, Belly is woken up the next morning by her mother, who is pissed. Laurel drove all that way to find her daughter hungover and the house destroyed. She demands that Belly get up and get out of there, and maybe it's the hungover state, maybe it's the fact that Belly's going through it, or maybe it's the fact that all summer she's felt like her mother has disowned her, but Belly pushes back on it, and the two get into a huge, giant fight. Belly feeling like her mother hasn't looked at her the same way since the funeral, and her mother basically admitting as such, yeah, my best friend died, and you made it all about you. Every fifth word, Laurel is trying to get Belly into the car to drive away and go home, but Belly's refusing to leave and give up on the house. It culminates in Laurel getting so frustrated she slaps Belly in the face, and Belly storms out of the house. And even Laurel's surprised at what she just did. In fact, everybody is. Jeremiah, who saw the incident go down, goes to the beach to console Belly in that moment. Belly brings up the fact that Conrad and Jeremiah had a huge fight the night before, but Jeremiah says, Belly, come on. And Belly looks him in the eye and says, whatever you think you saw last night, you're wrong. I'm over your brother. And Jeremiah subtly shakes his head and says, there's always going to be something between you two. While Belly and Jeremiah were on the beach, Laurel made her way through the house to see just how bad of a state the house really is in after this party. And she's pissed. All of Susanna's stuff is missing, and she sees both Steven and Conrad starts yelling at them, but they say, whoa, slow down. We didn't move any of Susanna's stuff. Julia did. She's selling the house. And that's a big surprise to Laurel. She knew that Susanna had reached out to Julia before she died about the house, but she didn't know that she failed to get in contact with her. She didn't know that Julia's plan was to put the house up for sale. If she did, she would have tried to put a stop to it. They start explaining how they showed up at the house not to throw a rager, but to actually get the house back. Unfortunately, Aunt Julia's in Boston at the moment. She's trying to sell the house. Conrad gets so frustrated he ends up walking away from the conversation. And Steven looks at his mom and says, look, I know I messed up, and Belly too, but at least she was here. When those boys needed her, she showed up. I mean, you didn't even tell anybody that this was coming. And Laurel starts to say how she was trying, but Steven cuts her off and says, try harder. Laurel heads outside at the exact same time that Belly and Jeremiah are coming back, and she asks Belly to talk alone. She apologizes for hitting her. The two have a very emotional conversation about what they've both been through the past couple months, and then the two make up. When they head back inside, the mindset is no longer about infighting. It's about trying to convince Aunt Julia to back out of the deal. The first thing she does is apologize to all the kids. She really thought that before Susanna died, her and Julia had come to an agreement on the house. She just assumed as much. But clearly she was wrong and she didn't follow up on it, and that led them to this moment. But she's reached out to Aunt Julia to hopefully talk her out of this deal. Taylor, who's still there, feels like she probably should head out. While both Belly and certainly Steven don't want her to, she feels like it's more of a family thing, and she's got volleyball camp coming up in a couple days anyway, so she really should head back to PA. Steven, though, isn't going to let her go back on a bus. No. He takes care of his women. He gives her that sweet Hyundai Sonata and then demands that she fill it up with premium. A little while later, Aunt Julia shows up, and she is pissed at the state of the house. But before she can really focus on that, Laurel pulls her aside so the two can have a private one-on-one conversation. Laurel does something that Aunt Julia feels like no one in her actual family has done. She just listens. She listens to all her complaints. She believes all the stories that she had from her childhood that scarred her. For Laurel, someone who was so close to Susanna, Julia's complaints make a lot of sense. Julia spent her entire life trying to get Susanna to realize that her version of her childhood wasn't glitz and glamour. It sucked. But anytime she tried to bring it up to Susanna, Susanna would just push it aside. And Laurel, being Susanna's best friend, certainly recognizes that because Susanna never wanted to focus on the bad stuff. In a very short amount of time, Laurel puts Band-Aids on all of the wounds that were opened up when Susanna died. And all those wounds caused Aunt Julia to want to sell the house ASAP. It seemed like Julia was a little bit jealous of Laurel's relationship with her sister. Because Laurel and Susanna were like sisters, but they weren't actual sisters. Julia wanted that, so because of it, it seemed like she had this warped vision of who Laurel was, but Now actually seeing her and talking to her and having an adult conversation with her, she realizes that all of it was a giant misunderstanding. Laurel was never trying to replace Julia. And if Julia were to keep the house, she'd be more than welcome to stay there whenever she wants because it will be her house. Laurel and her family, they won't show up if she doesn't want them to. When the two walk back in the house a little while later, Julia tells all the kids that she's decided to back out of the deal, and there's a big celebration. Laurel reminds everybody, though, that they can't celebrate quite yet. Now it's a matter of convincing Adam to buy the house from Julia, and that's not going to be an easy task. Laurel calls him up to meet at the house, and then they play the waiting game. As they do that, Belly decides to go have a one-on-one conversation with Conrad. It's really just to check in on him, but he wants to talk about the previous night, everything that they talked about, everything they really argued about, and he apologizes for breaking up with her the way that he did. He realizes now he never should have done it that way. What he's worried about is that she looks back on losing her virginity in that house and she regrets it, but she says, no, Conrad, I don't regret it. I was in love with you, and I know that you were in love with me at that point. They both agree that they don't want to hurt each other again, but Belly points out, I don't really know if that's something that we can control. To wrap up the conversation, Belly says, friends? And then gives him a hug, but you can tell Conrad, he doesn't want to be friends. A little while later, Adam shows up, and he doesn't even notice the kids. He walks in the kitchen, and he hasn't seen any of them, so he thinks he's just having a one-on-one conversation with Laurel and Julia. And the first thing he says is, hey, thanks for driving down here to have my back. But Laurel says, yeah, that's the thing, I don't have your back on this. I want you to buy the house. Now, at this point, all the kids are standing outside of the kitchen, and they're eavesdropping on this conversation. They're eavesdropping on Laurel pitching to Adam why he should buy the house and how the kids can't lose the house. But Adam, he's dead set on selling it. He wants nothing to do with it. In fact, he thinks Laurel is crazy for even pitching this idea. The conversation gets super contentious. Adam at one point says, I can't believe that you want me to squander my kids' trust to buy this house. I can't believe you support that. And Laurel says, I don't support that. I want you to move some money around to buy the house for them. And Adam thinks that's an even crazier idea. Julia actually steps in at one point and says, why is it that those boys have been trying harder for the past 3 days to save this house than you have in the past several weeks? And when Laurel tries to add on to that, Adam tells her to shut up. She doesn't have a vote in this. While she thinks she does because Susanna made her feel like family, she's not family. The two get into a bit of a cursing fit, but when Adam says Susanna wouldn't want us fighting like this, that's enough for Conrad. He steps in and says, you have no idea what Mom would want. You lost her a long time ago. That's when Adam realizes that those kids were listening to the entire conversation. The conversation suddenly goes from very contentious to very emotional. Adam gets to the real reason of why he wants to sell the house. It's because when he goes through the house, Susanna is everywhere. In a matter of about 2 to 3 minutes, Adam goes from, I am selling this house, no matter what, to changing his mind and saying, not only will I buy the cousin's house, I'll sell my house in Boston. I don't need that. And I'll use the money from that sale to buy the cousin's house. So at least at the moment, his two kids don't hate him. After the good news, those two kids, Jeremiah and Conrad, go to the beach because they still haven't talked about the previous night. It's Conrad's opportunity to apologize to Jeremiah because he really didn't think that he hurt him that badly when him and Belly started dating. All he's ever known about his brother is how easy things come to him, and it seemed like he had moved on, but he completely underestimated how hung up Jeremiah would be on her. Jeremiah admits he doesn't want to be the guy who's smiling when he's not happy, and that's exactly what he was doing every time he saw his brother and Belly. Conrad mentions to Jeremiah that he and Belly had talked in the morning, and now it looks like they're just friends. They leave the conversation on really good terms, and they agree that moving forward, if there's an issue, they just talk about it. They don't let it fester deep inside of them. Oh, and Conrad lets Jeremiah know about Stanford, and Jeremiah is in full support. There is one issue, though. Conrad wasn't actually expecting to go, but Jeremiah isn't allowing that. He knows that it's his brother's dream school. And when Conrad says, Jer, I'm not even going to get in, they're going to revoke my acceptance because I'm going to fail my final tomorrow, Jeremiah says, no, you're not. We're going to spend all night studying with you. Then we're going to drive you to Brown. You're going to take that final, you're going to pass it, and you're going to transfer to your dream school. Before they can do that, they have to say goodbye to Julia and Sky. Julia mentions to Laurel how she's pretty surprised that Sky's really blossomed in cousins, but she's looking forward to coming back. Both Conrad and Jeremiah are happy to get to know their cousin, and they thank Aunt Julia for backing out of the deal, and then they say goodbye to him. Then the kids get to work on an all-night cramming session. When they get a break, Belly and Conrad go outside, and Belly starts to tell Conrad how she's starting to have feelings for him again, but she looks over and Conrad is passed out because it's been an all-nighter. And when they wake up the next morning, she doesn't bring it up. But the groups go their separate ways. Stephen and Laurel head back to Westchester, PA, while Conrad, Jeremiah, and Belly head off to Brown to drop Conrad off. And when they do, they have a little bit of time to kill. And the school that Jeremiah is going to, Finch, isn't too far away. So he decides to take her on a tour. He takes her to the bookstore. They buy a hoodie. They frolic. They look like boyfriend and girlfriend. And then they check out the volleyball court because the volleyball team was looking at Belly. And it's there that she decides, man, I really need to get back on the volleyball court. When we get home, I got to talk to the coach. But then it's time to actually go pick Conrad up. And while they're standing outside and they're waiting for him to arrive outside of his class, they start having a conversation about their relationship. And Belly can't understand why Jeremiah is so hot and cold with her, but he doesn't want to get hurt again. They talk it out. Next thing you know, they are just sucking face. I mean, they are going at it right there. And then they get caught by Conrad. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry. It'll be up in a day or two.